Hi, today I'm going to talk about inflation during the post COVID 19 pandemic. Inflation, by the way, is a term that we use if you refer to the overall increase in the prices of goods and services in the market. Take note that inflation is not always bad. It's not always negative because inflation can actually be an indication that the economy is active, that there is trade going on, and people are buying things. And that is a good thing. Unless, of course, if it's extremely high, just like what this country's experienced in the last 2 decades, then we have a problem. But for most countries in the world in the last 10 years or a decade, they weren't really having a problem with inflation. Not until the COVID 19 pandemic happened. Because during the pandemic, a lot of the borders were closed. Trade was restricted, so a lot of people weren't really able to buy things or do the things that they really want to do. But when the economy reopened, when trade restrictions were lifted, people were too excited to buy and spend their money. And they kept on buying things online and from physical stores, and this was called revenge spending or revenge shopping. And this caused money supply in circulation to increase that it pushed prices upward. So, with too much demand happening, prices were pulled up. It was called demand pull inflation. And that is not a good thing because with too much inflation, the cost of living increases. Now it's too expensive to buy a house, to own a car, to send a child to school, to spend for healthcare. Now you have to spend more for the things that you usually buy in the past because purchasing power of the currency reduces. Now for a business, they have to spend more on their cost of production. And if they don't increase their prices, they will experience lower profit margin. So too much increase in price or too much inflation is not healthy for an economy. We see here that in 2019, before the pandemic, most of the countries are colored yellow because these countries had very low inflation rates, around 3%. And there are, of course, outliers colored in purple, which had around 255% inflation rate. And that also happened in 2021. But as you can see, it's almost colored in yellow for both 2019 and 2021, pre-pandemic and during pandemic. But after 2021, which is the post-pandemic period, we can see that some of the countries are now slightly turning into yellow-green or greenish or purplish because they are now experiencing higher inflation rates. And we can also see that in the average world inflation rate. Let's focus our eyes on 2018, where the average inflation rate in the world is just around 4%, and it slightly went up to 6.81% in 2020, and then 7.54% in 2021. And in 2022, the post-pandemic period, it's around 11.58%. Again, this is too much. This is not healthy. So what should be done? Because there's something has to be done. Well, the government can actually do a lot of things. Like in the central bank can increase its interest rates because with higher interest rates, people will keep their money in the bank. They will not spend, or people will not borrow money from the bank because the interest rate is so high, and this will cause the money circulation to reduce, and it will lower spending and investment, and it will also lower inflation. And another thing that can be done is to reduce the government spending because one of the big spenders in the economy is actually the government itself. So if the government will reduce its spending on infrastructures, on operational expenses, it can also lower money in circulation, lower spending and investment, and lower inflation. So what I'm trying to say here is that whenever there is a problem involving inflation, the government must try to look into what it can do. It can evaluate if that inflation rate is tolerable or normal. But if it sees that it's already beyond what is normal, then it must do something in order to avoid further problems or worse problems in the economy in the future. That will be all. Thank you.